All right, we're going to get started in just a moment. This is going to be my first, I guess, Q&A. There were a couple of questions on some of my earlier videos that, because of my workload, it is difficult for me to answer in text. So I wanted to go ahead and take a moment to just do this live, and I wanted to make this a thing where I can address and touch base with the community. And answer some of the questions you guys might have about what we're doing and, whatever else. 1 second. Let me adjust this real quick. If you're here watching, let me know where you're coming in from. City, state, country. If you train martial arts, what system? If you are a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe, hit the notification, all that stuff. So we'll get started in just a moment here. Looks like I have one person in. All right. I think I'm gonna go. What's going on? Good morning. Where are you guys at now? You guys still doing the traveling? Wait for a few more people, then I'll start getting into some of the questions. Of course, you guys can always play this back. Looks like I have. There we go. What's going on? Good morning, Sensei Emmett. Good to see you. Awesome. So I'm gonna pull up my video. I guess my most recent video on tir machete. Turn this off real quick and address a few questions that I had here on this video. So just give me a quick moment. Let's see. Next time I'll have these already written out for me so I don't have to scroll through to find the questions. Let me see here. Let me see. So I had one really good I had a couple of really good questions concerning the tir machete video. A gentleman, let me see. I'm not sure if it's a gentleman or not. Legacy of Abaco, I believe, is the person's name. Legacy of Abaco. They asked. Okay, so it says appears to be effective, but I've never seen those moves done in tir machete. Are they your own modification? So this one I answered in text, and my reply was yes and no. So in the video, what I was demonstrating. So for those of you who have seen tir machete, wow, Sensei Emmett, I will answer that question. So hang on, I'll take care of that question after this one. Okay, that's a really good question, which was Capoeira founded in West Africa or in Brazil? The quick answer is evidence is pointing towards Central Africa as being the root and the foundation of Capoeira. And of course, that was germinated through the slave trade in Brazil. So you won't find, African Capoeira in like Angola, but you will find parent arts that contributed to the development of what would later become Capoeira. But I'll answer that more in depth in just a moment. So what we're doing with the tir machete, what I was experimenting with tir machete, and for those of you who've seen tir machete, there's a lot of confusion as to like what's going on, right? So you have one person who is usually feeding the attack. So the attacker is giving energy, giving shots to that's literally what they're saying. We're giving shots to our partner. Now, typically the person that's doing the defensive movements, they're having to do a lot more work. And the focus and emphasis is really on them and less so on the attacker. So another question I get a lot of times when we do tir machete is like, well, why are you turning? Why are you giving your back to this person? As the attacker, my movements don't matter as much as the defender. I'm just giving them energy and something for them to feed off of. Now, the defender, what we're trying to do is we're trying to close in that really dangerous range, especially in that weapons range, that medio, in the Filipino arts, they would say the medio range, into that close quarters range, that corto range, from the Filipino perspective. So going from long range into close range, where you'll see a lot of times they'll be working those positions against the arm. Again, as the attacker, my job is to give this energy, this unrelenting attack, whether they're working on my arm or not. I'm just feeding them that energy. So the defender is trying to move into that close range to shut down those angles and to move off to the side, right? So that's where we see tir machete being played or practiced or drilled, depending on how you want to envision that. For me, the play and the drilling go together. So now in this video, what I was experimenting with is taking those skills outside of the drill and outside of the play and starting to like develop ways to apply them in like real-time sparring. Now, granted, in the video, we're still following mostly the conventions of the play, but we're trying to work from a little longer range and work from closing in. The next step in that evolution would be to start putting on a little bit more protective gear, and then we can work more lively. And the idea, again, with the Avril system, from my understanding, and I'm not an expert in the system, but from my understanding, the idea is being able to shut down your opponent's attacks, take out that to close distance and steal away their space. So then from there, what we were doing in the videos, like we were trying to close in, and then once we got into range, we use the hand to trap down the blade, and then we get our finishing strike, and then we get out. So that's just the drill of how we're trying to understand its application, okay? And we're using this hand passing, checking from other Afro-diasporic stick and machete art. So in Venezuela and in Garote, in Venezuela and in Colombian machete, they'll use the hand to pass and to check and to stop things. So we're kind of, again, this is my blend of machete system. So we're doing that. That's kind of where that comes from. So to answer his question, it is my modifications. It's me trying to understand how to apply those skills to combat against a resisting opponent. And so the next phase will be, doing it against someone who's, first drilling in a more lively way, and then getting to the point where we can spar with it. But that, with the way things are now, it's difficult to have that kind of interaction. But working towards it. But that was a really great question. Just to double back on Sensei Emmett's question, I don't want to get super long-winded on it, but just to kind of jump back in on the origins of capoeira. So in the African diaspora, we see this high concentration, and it's a crazy concentration of fighting arts that you find in the African diaspora. And that to me is like a testament that the cultures that were coming over were so impacted by their local forms of fighting that this practice was carried over in many different countries and places throughout the Americas. So capoeira is no different. It germinated and developed and evolved in Brazil, but the roots and the seeds of that, is looking from the best evidence available, is strongly connected to Central African movement and Central African styles of warfare and Central African cosmology and spirituality. So I lean more heavily towards Central Africa, even more so than West Africa. Even though in West Africa there's tons of fighting arts, there were several people that were brought over, as prisoners of war. Yoruba, Igbo, Fulani, Hausa. These people were instrumental in, the Fan people in Dahomey. These people were instrumental in many of the revolts and insurrections that occurred throughout the New World, or the North America, North and South America, and in West Africa. Of course, I'm saying there were these traditions of fighting that were there as well. But I think at what we'll see is that Central Africa was more of the foundation, and then in certain areas you'll see like a West African built upon that foundation. And it's kind of evident in Capoeira too when you look at the instruments. Before the beating bow is the heart and the soul of Capoeira, but it wasn't always part of the practice. You know, it's a fairly recent thing. So early depictions of Capoeira is shown with a drum, or sometimes with no music whatsoever. You know, so the beating bow I believe, was said to be introduced, or you start seeing the beating bow connected with Capoeira in the late 1800s. Before that, you know, it was still. Well, I had a point. I lost my point because I'm getting old. But I think that's the thing, is the art was still in a state of flux and still in a state of evolution, especially in its new environment. So yes, I say the roots are firmly in Central Africa. That's what it was. See, it came back to me. So the modern day bateria that we use in Capoeira, it reflects like these different cultural influences from different parts of Africa and the Mediterranean. So you have the beating bow, which is a strongly Bantu Central African instrument, as well as sorry, I'm getting a bunch of calls in, as well as you see the instrument like the atubaki, which replaced the Central African style drum, which is usually like a transverse drum, which is laid down to its side. The atubaki is a more vertical upright drum, you know, which was introduced by West Africans. The agogo and heko, these were all like West African style instruments. The pandero, the tambourine, is attributed to like the Mediterranean, but I'm sure there's other cultures that use similar types of hand drums. So you'll see these layers of these cultures that are represented in this art. So that's what we see with the music, and I'm pretty sure that this is the same thing that you'll see with the movements as well. This is Central African core that lays the foundation, and then, you know, these other cultures and the environment and circumstances and local regional cultures that cause the art to develop in different ways. And we have to bear in mind, when we're looking at Capoeira, we're looking at a living art that is constantly in flux and constantly changing, and adapting to the needs of its community. And it's not always going to be the same. And it's not a monolith. No matter what people say, it's not a monolith. You guys have a bunch of really good questions. Let me pull back here real quick. Let's see here. That was a great question, Sensei. I mean, I didn't want to get too long-winded on it, but it says, where can I get or buy sticks for practice and fighting? It depends. Like, I like using rattan. It's pretty forgiving, inexpensive. If you're in the States, you can order rattan from Frank's Canes and Rattan Supply in California, and you can order a 10-foot pole and get it cut down to the sizes that you need. If you're looking for a hardwood stick, my company, Street Forge Armory, we make a number of implements that you can use. If you're interested in that, a really inexpensive way and a durable way is to go and get some rattan. But I'd be happy to sell you guys some sticks or even some training machetes or training weapons or whatever else. Ruthia, I cannot pronounce your last name, but it looks very beautiful. It looks elf-like. Thank you for that. It says, I love your videos. What is the best way to learn to use a Kopesh? Done fencing, kendo, HAMA. Okay, that's a great question. It's a tough question too. So there are no manuals for Egyptian martial arts, ancient Egyptian martial arts, or weapons use. So for reconstructing ancient Egyptian fighting arts, which is something that I'm doing and trying actively to get better at that, what I found is most useful for me is I start with the iconography. Well, I'll start with the material stuff, right? So the iconography, the weapons, and I from there I look at living traditions that are practiced in that are found in East Africa, in Egypt, in Sudan, and then in East Africa, in the larger East African context, and then in the larger African context, and then even if there's any Mediterranean or Middle Eastern uh, contemporaries that would be helpful in reconstruction, we'll use that as well. But we stick primarily to East Africa as our foundation. So all edge weapon work starts with. Ooh, there you go. Nice. Look at this, guys. Sorry to cut in real quick. We're live. This is a cross guard for a wooden Sudanese kaskara that we will be working on. This looks good. Looks good. Yeah, I can go on to the pommel, or you can clean up some more. Okay, thank you. So train of thought. Lost my train of thought. Yeah, I think I got it. So we compare the iconography with the living traditions. In a lot of ways, some of the living traditions that are still practiced can inform your understanding of how they could have possibly used these weapons. Now, everything that we're doing is guesswork, but we're trying to use guesswork that's free from over-martializing. I probably just made that word up, over-martializing the techniques and focusing mostly on the principle. So yeah, so it's not an easy job. There's no definite, clear-cut answers to that. Besides, learn what the tool, like actually get a Kopesh, get one that's close to scale or one that functions, and start learning what the tolerances and the abilities and the advantages and disadvantages of the weapon, and then learn. You have to understand how this weapon was used in the context of New Kingdom Egypt, which there's not a lot of information for that. And the Kopesh kind of overshadows most other weapons because it's a very interesting shape and it's very a very iconic weapon to connect it with Egypt. But it didn't really last that long as a weapon within Egyptian history. It was the shorter leaf shape cut and thrust swords, not nearly as exotic looking, but probably seen a lot more work and range on the battlefield. So there's a lot that we don't know about how it was used. We do know from handling bronze and handling mild steel, iron style Kopesh. We do know that it's an extremely good at cutting. Once we have the proper length of the weapon and we understand that, because when you're looking at the weapon, it's okay, the shape of it, that hooking shape, shield, and true enough, you can hook shields with the Kopesh, but it's not a terribly long weapon. And I think more of the advantages come from its ability to cut and slash as opposed to its abilities to hook shields, which it can do. We've kind of tested that and played around with that. And it can definitely do that. I'm just not sure if that would have been your go-to thing. So there's a lot of blank spots and there's no good clear-cut answers. The best thing is to get yourself a Kopesh and see what it can do, and then take that information, because all the weapons training in the Egyptian context was coming from stick to edge weapons. So we're looking at a time period before there was a clear distinction between swords and long knives and daggers and stuff. So where now we think edge weapon, we use stick as a surrogate for that, we go that way. In the past, the stick was the training for the edge weapon, and that had more time in use than the edge weapon itself. So in the time of when the Kopesh was introduced, the stick fighting was used to inform and develop the fencing principles for the Kopesh or for any other edge weapon that was used. So stick fighting is the starting point, and the best connection that I've seen for Egyptian stick fighting, and not talking about long sticks, but talking about sticks that will readily translate into like close quarter weapons, or weapons that you would use with a shield. Nubia stick fighting, I think, is like one of the best correlations to ancient Egyptian stick fighting. It even, from the equipment and the stances, it mirrors Middle Kingdom style plank, shield, and stick fighting, I think, to a T. I think it's probably one of the best things to look at for just understanding the weapon system, that shield and weapon configuration. So I would start there, and then you have to parlay that understanding you get from the stick fighting into what can I do with this weapon based off of that foundation, if that makes any sense. So I know it's not it's the most honest answer I can give, and it doesn't offer that much information, but that would be the best bet to go, I think. And that was a really great, tough question. Let me see. Okay, so entity as, hold on, here we go, I'm gonna jump. Okay, so Alexander asks, can I use a machete from Walmart if I grind off the edge? Yes, you can. Yeah, if you grind off the edge, and if you want to add a little extra protection, you can get some thin cardboard or thin paper, and just kind of fold it over the edge, and a little bit of duct tape along the edge to kind of like foil it a little bit, and then you're good. You should be good to go. A lot of times you'll see when they're playing with the machete, they'll actually turn the flat, and that's actually used as a way of foiling the blade, a way to like play safely with your partner and preserve them. And you'll see the same thing in like Tuareg sword and in Beja sword. They'll turn the blade, the flat, and they'll do their practice, their fencing, or their fighting with the flat of the blade to be nice. And that's kind of something that my instructor in Haitian machete was given to him from his instructor. He says, for friends, we use the flat, and for the enemies, we use the edge. Let's see here. Are there any HAMA training places in Canada? Yes. That's a question from Entity. Yeah, so we do have a Canadian group in Ontario. Two of our council members are based in that area. Mansa or Adam Myrie and Nicholas Dawkins. If you would, and you guys, I recommend go check out the HAMA YouTube page. It should be Historical African Martial Arts Association, our YouTube page. If I was on my stuff, I would have it already queued up. Send them a request, not a friend request, not Facebook, but go check out the HAMA Association page, and you can meet some of the other council members and see some of the work that they're doing there. But yeah, we have two guys there in Canada for you. See, okay, Cyru says, what are ways you can incorporate weapons like machete or dagger into capoeira? So that's a great question. When we see dagger work, knife work, and what in Professor T.J. Obi's book, when he mentions edge knives and stuff being used with capoeira, he mentions that the use is built into the movements that the people are already doing. So when you watch the way the hands move, sometimes the mestres will play in their ginga. Their ginga's not really too like mechanical, where each hand comes up and it protects. It's on the base level, yes. But as they get more experience, you find more experienced players, their upper body play is a little looser. And so it's in that looseness where you'll see them imitate the razor or the knife in these motions with their hands. So they'll ginga and they'll do these cuts and these quick snipes with their hands. A really good mestre to watch, it would be Mestre Brandao. He still has a lot of that in his older mestre. He still has a lot of that razor stuff in his movement, and it comes out quite a bit. And he's really interesting to see how he puts it together. But basically, as we're moving our hands, these are all motions that can be done as cuts and stuff like that. And that's kind of where, in my opinion, you'll see the knife come out in capoeira. There's a few again, what I said earlier about capoeira is art is constantly shifting and constantly adjusting. So like when we're looking at capoeira today, we got to understand that it's different than what the capoeira was, you know, say 50, 60, 100 years ago. It was done differently. There's different ways that it had to adjust, and different things that the larger community wanted to keep and not keep. And, you know, that's kind of what we see right now. But in the past, it was constantly evolving, constantly changing to meet its needs. And so that is kind of what I think as far as like the razor work. I did a video on using the machete, and what I did is I just from using a ginga, I worked on how I can incorporate these cuts while I move in the ginga. Now, it wasn't really done in a way that was very tactical and responding to somebody else. It was just me just moving with these strikes as I was stepping in the ginga. So from my experience, yes, that's what I would do. There was Dança de Guerra with Mestre João Pequeno and Mestre João Grande. They're playing Capoeira Angola, and they have knives when they're doing it. And again, they're doing their same movements, but the hand is weaponized now. So you have these stabs and these cuts that they're doing, mostly stabs, I think. But yeah. So check out Mestre Brandao, and then check out Dança de Guerra with Mestre João Grande and João Pequeno to see how people incorporate that. And then you can do a little search online. You see a few more mestres and people playing around with razors. Mestre Curio did something in the Pastinha documentary that was, I don't know how old it is, but he was playing with one of his students and he pulled out the razor, and you can see how what was really cool was, I mean, yeah, he had the razor and he was moving, trying to do his cuts. But what was really cool is how his student was trying to like ride and stop that razor from coming up, So I would check out those 3 areas to see how how edge weapons were incorporated. And yeah, just great questions. Let me see. Moving on. What do you think Carthaginian fighting styles? How do they differ from other North African fighting styles? This would be a great question for Adam Myrie in the HAMA Association to answer. He has a very invested interest in Carthaginian history and warfare. I don't really know how it would differ, in that I think that the Carthaginians brought together different fighting styles from a number of different groups of people throughout North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. So you had like the Numidians, who were masters at the hit and run tactics on horseback. You see the Carthaginian army utilizing them. At the same time, their core sacred band were based off of Greek fighting tactics, and then you had whatever was practiced on the Iberian Peninsula. So I think that's what made them different, is that they had they benefited from having different fighting styles incorporated in their army, whereas the Numidians were masters at a specific way of fighting, a specific style of fighting, which was, quick, lightning, harassing, skirmishing style of fighting. I think that's kind of the best answer that I can give, and I'll have to like look up some more stuff to kind of answer a little bit better. Maybe next time I'll bring on Adam and he can talk a little more in depth about that. But that was a great question. That was from J Smooth D. Thank you for being here. Let's see. Thank you, Sairu, for the compliment. Moving on. Thank you. So this is don't care. Sorry, my old man trying to read these names. Don't care, I think. Says, I love your work and have watched for years. How large is HAMA community in the United States? And what would you recommend for those who would like to get their hands on more training? Thanks. Okay, that is a great question. So since we don't have a lot of manuals, we don't have any manuals really, to be honest. We have to do field work, research on our own. And it's difficult because of the source material we're having to draw from many different places. I think the best way to get started with HAMA is to anchor yourself in a living tradition, right? So say, for example, I'm really into like medieval North Africa, right? And I want to learn more about the different, fighting arts and, cultures from the Maghreb or, from Mamluk Egypt. So where I would recommend starting is I would say start with al-Mathrag or Tahtib. Al-Mathrag is a stick fighting from Algeria, and the stick was used and replaced the sword. So you have a direct connection to older fencing style, bladed fencing styles when you train in Mathrag. And then Tahtib, even though it's typically connected to ancient Egypt, I honestly feel that it is more of a connection to medieval Egypt rather than ancient Egypt. That's just my opinion. And I'm not a practitioner of Tahtib, so I can't really, speak of any on the level of that. But there definitely are techniques that will help in reconstructing some of the pole arm or some of the two-handed fighting weapons that were used maybe in Mamluk Egypt. So I say again, anchor yourself in a living tradition, and then from there you can start, reconstructing based off of that. Now, those are things you're going to have to consider. Is what happens is a fighting art once they've ceased to be used on the battlefield, they tend to become like sports, or they tend to become folkloric, or they tend to, lose their character. In the case for Mathrag, it's in some ways become more of a sport in the sense that the sparring is. I'm not saying that contact has never happened, but there's a formula in how it's practiced and how it's played. So you would have to you would have to figure out what weapons they were using, and then start trying to apply those principles that you will learn from the stick to see how well they translate over to the blade. And there may be some differences that you find. Again, say that you were interested in Goonie stick, you were interested in Zulu warfare, right? You wanted to learn how you wanted to get into Zulu, battlefield fighting. I say anchor yourself in Goonie stick fighting, right? That is a great way to learn how to use the shield with an impact weapon. But then the next step for you from there is what are your sources for Zulu warfare, and see what they describe how the Zulus fought. So not really my area, but we hear how Shaka used the shield. Well, make the shields larger, make the spearhead the half shorter, and the spearhead larger for close quarters thrusting, right? And so we hear that the tactic was close quarters, lock shields, expose the flank, and thrust with the spear. So then, if you were wanting to reconstruct that, I say first step, Nguni stick fighting and and feel how the culture moves. Then the next step is you can start experimenting with those movements, say with the spears, or say with the axe, or say with some of the other weapons. That would be one way that you can get started in the practice, you know, while you're where you're at. You know, there are plenty of people who have videos up on Nguni stick fighting, on matrag, on Colombian machete, on Haitian machete, on stick flicking. You know, reach out to them and see if they have a distance learning. You know, if they'll monitor you while you train and practice. That's one way to go. That would be an easy way to do it out of all of the stuff. So that would be the best way, I think, to start, as far as like if you wanted to do like independent study. At the same time, if you already have like skill with using weapons, you know, maybe you can bypass some of that, you know. But it gets tricky because, you know, we're interacting with material that is still like actively part of, you know, someone's culture. So it's always important to be respectful and mindful of that while we're working with it. So whenever you're like, if you are say Nguni stick fighting and you're like, okay, well, I'm this is how it's done in Nguni stick fighting. I'm going to experiment with this with the spear, and always being able to distinguish between what you're doing, what's your interpretation, and then what you're getting from your source, if that makes any sense. Sorry, that was a long answer, but and there's just no easy answers at all. I wish there were. And we're working on HAMA. We're working on a translating a Mamluk treatise, so that those people who are interested in like North African, you know, or even Islamic influenced Africa, Mamluk fighting would have been the information that was presented in the treatises would have been in some ways been part of what people learned, or what learned Muslims would have or informed Muslims would have used. So we're working on getting that translated. It'll be coming out soon. You know, it's been a long road on that. So yeah, it's a tough field. It's a tough field. Let me see. Keep moving on here. Let's see what's next. Are there any credible books? This is from Corey Fantoma. Are there any credible books on HAMA for those who want to learn? And then that's also James Robbins. What books should you read if you're interested in African martial arts? Also, what are some things to consider when writing combat? I think I'll be able to answer both of those together. And I kind of touched on some of that in my last answer. So books. So for like martial arts technique, there are not a lot of books out there on historical martial arts. There are a few books that are on like neo-African martial arts that are based off of several African principles and applied in like modern context. But just like for looking up books about historical or cultural martial arts, I would recommend Dr. Ed Poe's books, plural. Dr. Ed Poe is he's a pioneer in the field of doing field research on African-based martial arts. He is in his 80s now. He's traveled throughout the world, from Madagascar to India, to various parts of Africa, to the Caribbean. And he's documented a number of these fighting arts, from damier, from capoeira, to Nguni stick fighting, to dambe boxing, and has a book on like Malagasy boxing and wrestling, and even he's done a number of books on South Indian fighting, Silambam and things of that nature. So he has a website called the Black Foundation, and I think it's spelled. His name is Dr. Ed Poe, and I can never remember exactly how he spells black. I think he spells it with a K, and it may be with two C's. Let me look it up real quick. I think what I'll do next time is I have like a moderator who can help me out with this. Let me look this up real quick. So he was instrumental and laid the foundation for many of the things that we're doing today, and he doesn't get enough credit for the work that he's done. He's self-published, so his books don't get a lot of press. Trying to find it. Hang on, sorry. There we go. So it's spelled black. Let's see. I'll put this in the chat. And hang on 1 second. Foundation.org. Okay, there's that. So if you go to his website, there are plenty of books that he's written on the subject, and he's actually started. He went to Brazil in the 60s, trained capoeira both with Mestre Pastinha and with Mestre Bimba. Came back to the States and started a capoeira group in like the late 60s. In the he's like from the Midwest. So I think it was in the Indiana area where he started a capoeira group. This was before Mestre Jalon came to New York with capoeira. So he was like the first person to introduce capoeira in the United States. But again, doesn't get a lot of credit for that. So if you get a chance, guys, go check out his website. He has lots of books. He's self-published. Again, he's definitely an elder, and he is actively traveling and documenting, and he's a great source of information. So yeah, that would be the first person I say look up. Now the second one, and he's a lot more recognized, and especially nowadays, would be Professor T.J. Obi. His book Fighting for Honor is probably one of the best books that kind of brings in the story of how the Central African fighting arts came to be in the Western Hemisphere, in the New World, or in the diaspora. So Professor T.J. Obi is another great person. He's kind of carried what Dr. Poe has done, and brought it out to the world a lot more. So you get those two. That's a good place to start. Now, as far as like, then we're kind of getting out of like history, out of like the arts themselves, and then we're just looking at just like military history. There are the books that are written by Robert S. Smith on warfare in pre-colonial Africa and the Yoruba kingdoms that talk a lot about the weapons and the arms and armor. There's Smaldon's book on arms and armor in Sokoto Caliphate in northern Nigeria. There is Professor John Thornton's book on warfare in the Western Atlantic world, which really breaks down like the different ways these cultures like fought and how they approach battle. And what's interesting is a lot of these cultures are who were being brought over and enslaved during the slave trade. So John Thornton's book is a really great one to have. And there are a bunch of other ones that are I'd have to sit down and make like a book list of things. There's lots of different people who have added extra pieces to the puzzle, but there's never been just like one book that's like it's like a technical book that shows you techniques. It's always either about the military history or about the martial art itself, with maybe a few descriptions of techniques and stuff. So hopefully that is helpful. That's a good place to start. Go there and support Dr. Poe definitely, because he's, like I said, he's been doing a lot of work. Let me see here. Move on. Okay. So Corey Fantoma says, if you could see any one HAMA from any period or region gain popularity, the recognition, practice, and influence around the world, which one would you pick and why? Damn it, that's a hard question. That's like asking me, like, who was my favorite child and why? It's a terrible question, Corey. Killing me. Whew, that is tough. And the reason why it's tough is because the area we study is so vast and so diverse that it's hard to pick one and have it do justice for all and be representative for all. So um, for me, what I would like to see, if it was just like me, this would be great. I would love to see either the fighting from medieval Nubia come to light, and I think that and to come to light. The reason why I think that Nubia is a really so East Africa is a very interesting nexus point for us, is that we have the antiquity and then we have like the literacy there, because which finding sources, literary sources, is important for us to be able to do these reconstructions, and in cultures where they were oral literate as opposed to writing. Some of these things have been lost just from time and just from the ravages of colonialism. So in an area, so we're relying heavily on literary sources or art sources in places where, again, they're oral literate. So Nubia and East Africa, you have this crossroads of many different literate cultures. And this is why I would say there first and then West Africa. So in West Africa, we have primarily, Arabic, and then we have the Tifnag, the Berber writing style in like West Africa. But in East Africa, you have, you know, uh, Arabic, Persian, Greek, um, gosh, Latin, and the ancient medieval Nubian. You have this cluster, Giz. You have these clusters of languages, of written languages that you can, get sources from. So you can read Roman sources or Greek sources, or you can, you know, read a correspondence between the king of Aksum and the king of Makuria. And I think that plus the art depictions, it offers a lot of information to help. Like I think that would be like the heart, that could probably be the heart for everything else, just because you have a rich literary culture, you have a rich artistic culture, and you just have more witnesses to kind of like bounce, um, to fill in those voids. So I would like to see, I would say medieval Nubia would be something that I would like to see gain more recognition and gain more information about. And then you have this confluence of like different African cultures that are, I mean, Africa's diverse, period. But yeah, I'd say a medieval Nubia is what I would like to see. It's a tough question, Corey. Killing me with that question. All right, moving on. Moving on. Is that all my questions there? Okay, cool. Let me go back to the videos because I had another one here. Where are we at? Now this is still from the Haitian Machete. I'm gonna have to cut this short for now because I'm almost going on an hour. I appreciate you guys hanging out here for as long as you have. So Benjamin Lamptey asked, did Jashard Wallington? Yes, Ruthie, I am doing distance learning. Send me an email if anyone is interested at Austin Warrior Arts at gmail.com, and we can talk about that. So Benjamin Lamptey asked, how do you learn all these? Question mark. Do you fly to the countries where it comes from and ask around, or do you visit the office of some sports/history commission in those countries? Okay, so I'm assuming after reading this out loud that he's asking like, how would you go, how would you go about learning these, how would you go about approaching someone to learn? For me, it depends on what I'm doing. So for the systems that I have a mentor and actually or an instructor in, I reached out to them through the internet and established a relationship with them, and either learned via distance or was able to train with them in person. And that's kind of how, for the living traditions, that I work with the information that I do. But before I made contact with them, I was still seeing and experimenting with whatever images or whatever videos or whatever they were presenting. So it just depends. I would say you can see people demonstrate skill from where we're at, and I would say just reach out to people and just ask and see if anyone is willing to teach you from a distance. And it's not the same as being upfront with somebody and training in person, but it could be a way to build a bridge. And it's important because some of these practices are we're on the verge of extinction, and sometimes it's difficult to find the value of this practice within the community where it's practiced. So by being willing to spend money there, to spend time, to draw attention to these areas, it helps to shed light and show value to these cultures. So I would say reach out to people and see if they're willing to train you. And that's the first step. Now, if you're traveling and say that you wanted to go and learn stick fighting from somewhere, I mean, again, you can go to the place. You probably have to go to the region, but you would need to do some research beforehand to know exactly where you should go. And again, it goes back to making contact with people. Like, it's even better for you to make contact with somebody from over there and then make travel plans, coordinate with them, and then that makes sure that you get a chance to train with them, because you could travel to wherever, and that's no guarantee that you're going to get to be able to connect with somebody to train with. So the first thing is we have this technology that allows us to connect across the world, and people are putting up these videos demonstrating their culture and demonstrating these arts. So reach out to them, just make contact and be humble and be honest. And I'm sure that they'll either say, no, I'm not interested, or we don't have the infrastructure for that. Or they were like, yeah, of course, we can do video training and figure it out. Cool. Let me see. Thank you, Corey. I think I'm gonna try to do this weekly. So what my plan is to post for the next 100 days, 100 days of content. So I'll probably do these weekly so that I can make my quota. And it is a good way for me to interact with you guys and to I don't ever really get to answer questions. Sometimes I get really crazy questions or crazy comments sometimes, but not too bad. I know people have gotten worse. So it'll be my way just to touch base. So I'm thinking on a weekly thing, I like to do this. And this was actually worked out better than I had thought, because I was planning on just reading some old questions, but you guys came with some really tough ones. So Larry Jackson Jr. asks, is there a book about the warrior mindset or ethos of ancient Kemetic soldiers? There must be a weekly Kemet that written about the warrior ethos. Right now, no, there's not. And I'm actually working on a book on yeah, Kemet is ancient Egypt. I'm actually working on a book that I hope will be a source book for ancient Egyptian like reconstruction. So I wanted to talk about the different weapons, the different weapons from pre-dynastic Egypt up into Ptolemaic Egypt, and how the soldiers trained, like whatever, it's like it's how they trained, what their armor looked like, if they wore armor, who they fought, and then also go into the combat sports that they practice in order to develop these skills, and then go into like a reconstruction of them. So I'm hoping I'm starting to get back into working on that book in earnest. I found an illustrator to help me, do the reconstruction of some of the iconography. So I'm looking at maybe this time next year to be finished. So hopefully that should come out soon. So, anyways, guys, thank you guys for being here. Like and subscribe if you're new to the channel, please. Like and subscribe. And if you're interested and able, I will leave a link if you're able to give like a love donation to help keep things going. That would be greatly appreciated, but not necessary. Thank you guys so much. More videos to come. I missed the video yesterday, so I'm gonna post another video up so I can stay on my 100-day commitment. And thank you guys for being here, and I'll catch you guys next time. Be safe. And I got more questions to answer, so I may do another live question, because there was a Capoeira one on my last video that I wanted to address live, but it's okay. This was great. I had a great time. All right, y'all take care. Peace. Love you too, Alex, man.